You're watching The Lookout, a production of the Division of World Languages and Cultural Studies here at Minot State University. I'm your host, Samuel Stinson. As part of the 2013 Summer Cohort series, the Northern Plains Writing Project invited speakers to come talk with us about their work, their research, and their interests. I recently got to speak with Jane Greer, who lives in North Dakota. Jane Greer is the founder of the Plains Poetry Journal. Greer edited the journal through the early 1990s and returned to writing after a career in civil service in 2019. She's been published in National Review, Modern Age, and First Things, among other publications. Greer recently published a poetry collection, Love Like a Conflagration, in 2020. The following interview is taken from our time talking with Jane Greer. Jane Greer, you're a formalist poet. You've had experience starting a literary journal, and you also have an experience in terms of public service in your time teaching also. And you're welcome here tonight. And thank you again for being here to talk about your craft and what you do.
Back in the 80s, I started the Plains Poetry Journal. And I did it because I wasn't so happy with the poetry that I was seeing in the big poetry magazines, such as Poetry. I knew that there were poets writing better stuff than that. And so I wanted them to be published. So I started it. It never was huge, but the people who subscribed to it were pretty rabid about it, liked it a lot. And I had it from 1981 to 1993. And at that point of my life, there were just, it was like a kind of a perfect storm of things that were pulling on my attention. And one of them was our son, one was my job, and one was Plains Poetry Journal. And so that was the only one that could give a little bit. So it had started out as a quarterly, and then for a couple of years I went twice a year, and then I realized that I didn't want a slow death like that. So in 1993, that was the last one. I think I published 43 issues of it. Then I started being published in a number of different magazines. I've had 2 books. My first book was published in 1986. And then I've had 2 books in the last 2 years, in the last 3 years, sorry, 2020 and 2022. There's prose and there's poetry. And poetry is elevated above prose. Now, I love prose. I'm a huge reader, but it is different from poetry. Poetry can say so much in so few words, in such a little amount of space. And it's because it approaches language differently than prose does. And a lot of people who have poetry published in great poetry magazines seem to think that if they kind of bleed their emotions onto the page, well, that's a poem. And I disagree with that, because all emotions are human emotions. If I am grieving, if I am in love, if I am angry, those are human emotions, and they're no different from yours. My emotions are exactly like anybody else's. You know, a broken heart is a broken heart. But what makes poetry poetry is how those feelings and those emotions, and maybe just a moment that you glimpse, how that is written, every bit as much as what is written.
I come from a background, in schooling, as far as, I went to a classic lyceum. So we started, Latin, poetry, and so very much formal, not modern formalism, but still formal, meter and everything else. You have so much power in so many, in so little words. Prose, sometimes it goes on and on. In poetry, you have a short time to make an impact, and the way you do that, it does make a difference. And Walt Whitman, it's a great example of, free verse, not so free.
Yes.
So I got super excited.
I have a whole shoebox, a boot box full of my typed, before computers, typed high school and college poetry. And I'm going to burn that before I die. I hope I burn it before I die, because I don't want anyone to ever see it. It's really, really bad, but I love it because it's so typical of girls that age. And it's part of the road that got me here.
Yeah, please don't burn it. I mean, just for that reason, right? Because it's part of that road.
Well, but I don't necessarily want everybody to see my road.
But I think that what makes it, it makes it gives an important message, because sometimes I think if people are intimidated by poetry, or they say, I don't understand poetry, and it's because they don't understand that we all start just by trying to write down something that's very powerful, very relevant to us, and it may not be a masterpiece, but it gets us started thinking in a certain way, and learning certain things, and learning what works and what doesn't work, and how you can actually express yourself better. So yes, please don't burn it.
Oh, yeah.
I think encourages people to see, okay, you have a great poet, but we all started, similarly, just trying to capture that moment. I was talking about poetry as like taking like a snapshot of a moment or a memory or whatever that could be, and I see that maybe I'm just transposing my way of reading, in your poetry as well, capturing those moments.
There are many reasons to write a poem. My reasons when I was 19 are very different from my reasons now. And I believe it's valid to write poetry to just express yourself, to get something powerful off your chest. That's valid. But that's probably not art. And to be art, somehow you have to step away from that desire to say what you need to say, and listen to what the poem wants you to say. Most of my poems do not wind up the way I envisioned them at the beginning. I make a judgment like anybody does, and I make it, is this a great poem, or is this a good poem, or does this fail in some major way or a lot of little ways? And I do that with my own too. I stand back enough that I can do that, and maybe have a whole page of poetry, but I will save 2 lines from it. I am not in control, except that I will try very hard to find the best words and put them in the best order and have them sound musical to my ears. But where my thoughts go, what words come to me, I have no control over that. Motherhood on the one quiet night. Today, our truculent son left for a week. Tonight, my husband reads, and for my sake, listens to music with the headphones on. knowing I'm close outside, the windows are open, knowing I pounce on quiet when I find it. The grief, I cannot seem to move beyond it, but in this silence, I will try to save some shred of this beastly day, try to believe in redemption and that I am not the beast. Voice tight, teeth showing, my hour come round at last.
When I read, I want to walk away with something. It doesn't have to be necessarily feeling happy or satisfied, but I have to ask to engage, my mind in some ways. And sometimes it doesn't happen,
Even if I read something, and even if all I think is, how did she do that? I want to know how she did that. I don't understand it, but I know it's cool. That's enough for me to then look at it some more.
Yeah, I tend to read poetry like I'm reading other people's mail. Not that I do that a lot. And not that I do it, anything but on, by accident. But I read and I'm thinking, oh, and at first I read it as an exchange usually between two people or several people. And I'm thinking, wait a second. In the space, it really isn't about me. I think I find a connection. And it might be through the recognition of a reference or a metaphor or something else, but something draws me in. And usually if I can find that, I'm usually okay when I read a piece. But I think you're right, or like what you were saying earlier, sometimes the reference is so obscure, I think, well, I'm reading somebody else's mail and I don't think the letter recipient would have even got it. It's like, what are they saying? I don't get it. It's like written in code upon code. And at that point, I'm lost. It's like, I know, again, I don't want to.
You're talking about Ezra Pound, aren't you?
I wasn't going to say, but now that you mention it. Yeah.
God of the gold and purple finches. Finches at all my feeders flash and bicker in ritual consternation and all weather. Jangle at me with never-ending want. Need me compliant, but omnipotent. Within the nearby pine, push comes to shove as the shrill chorus nags me, makes me leave the cool deck and my chair and drink and book to fetch seed quickly, fix their rotten luck. The bounty I bestow with great affection, they apprehend as wanton dereliction, and no amount of care will bring me love. Their gratitude grows less the more I give. There's no end to their petulance and hunger. Their ceaseless praying always sounds like anger at me, all kind, all generous, all seeing, in whom they live and move and have their being.
So in the poem, it's the finches that are praying, and you're the one dispensing, or the persona is dispensing. Yeah.
I'm God. I'm God. Don't you think that's God, how God looks at us?
We've reached that point in the program where we have to say goodbye. We'd like to again thank Jane Greer for appearing on the program and for speaking with our summer cohort series for the Northern Plains Writing Project. We'd also like to thank the Northern Plains Writing Project for participating. Thanks again for watching. This is the Lookout Podcast. Stay tuned for the next episode. And as always, be seen, be heard, be inspired. Take care.